In addition to these protests over immigration, it was another wild day in Washington. Mississippi Senator Thad Cochran said he'll resign on April 1st because of poor health. The 80-year-old Republican chairs the powerful Appropriations Committee. And a former Trump campaign aide announced he will defy a subpoena from the special counsel in the Russia probe. Sam Nunberg left the campaign in its early days. Today, he rejected any suggestion that the Trump team colluded with Russia, but he also said he thinks the special prosecutor may have evidence against the president. It is a perfect time for Politics Monday with Tamara Keith of NPR and Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief for USA Today. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
So we can all agree it really was a wild day, officially, but let's go back to DACA. Lisa set up very nicely, Tam, I think, how we got to this point. Where do we go from here? I mean, there's so much grassroots effort and enthusiasm to get this solved. And I would point out there was some bipartisan agreement at one point that DACA should be addressed. How do we go from here?
So President Trump today tweeted, hey, let's make a deal. But the White House is also saying that the president has laid out his 4 principles, the things he wants. What happened is that the president had met with bipartisan members of Congress. He said, send me whatever you can come up with, I'll sign it. Then next thing you know, he is saying, actually, I have these 4 principles. I need these 4 things. And without these 4 things, I won't do it. The Senate voted on the president's principles, and of all the things the Senate voted on a few weeks ago related to immigration, that got the least support. It had something like 39 yes votes. It had a majority who opposed it, and that included Republicans. So it's not clear where it goes from here, and without that really firm pressing deadline, Congress just doesn't move quickly.
Susan, you were saying before that when it comes to immigration, we have seen this movie before.
That's right. We saw President George W. Bush pursue an immigration package, and then President Obama did, and then President Trump said he wanted to pursue one. But the fact is, when the Senate was moving toward a bipartisan deal, the president undercut that movement by tying new limits on legal immigration to the effort to protect the so-called Dreamers. The fact is, there is a national consensus that the Dreamers should be allowed to stay legally in this country. There's no political consensus in Washington. The country has made a judgment on this. In that way, it's like the guns debate. You know, you take a poll, Americans agree on this by a pretty sizable number. It's just that Washington can't seem to make a deal.
Well, let's take up this point, Tam, that Susan mentions. On the issue of guns, we saw the president last week following the Parkland shooting say he brought a bunch of bipartisan group of lawmakers together, indicated that he wanted to have a big omnibus comprehensive gun control piece of legislation, harden schools. And then he meets with the NRA, and it seems like now in the Senate and Congress that nothing is going to happen. What happened to that momentum?
I think that what we've learned is that when President Trump has a big bipartisan meeting of members of Congress that is televised, it's like throwing spaghetti against a wall. And whatever the president says isn't necessarily what the president believes, or more to the point, what the president is going to push for. And the president has shown with both of those cases that he's not actually willing to expend political capital to make the deal.
You know, it's always safe to vote against action, especially when it comes to limits on guns. The one thing that might shake up this paralysis are the marches that our students are leading on March 24th. And the question we've had is this a moment that terrifies politicians enough that they actually pass something that Americans support? I mean, support for things like universal background checks or limits on assault weapons, they're all but universal in this country. A majority by big margins of gun owners support them. So I wonder if these very articulate and students with their heartbreaking stories about what happened at their schools might move this debate at last.
Well, we'll obviously be watching how that one goes. Tam, we also saw today a cleavage within the GOP itself over President Trump's proposed tariffs on steel and aluminum. He came out very forcefully and has been for several days now tweeting very strongly why he thinks that this is important to do. But within his own GOP, all the way up to Paul Ryan saying, no, trade wars are bad ideas. They don't get won. Don't do this. How do they resolve that?
President Trump has found a way to drive a wedge within his own party, which is a relatively impressive thing to do. All along, he's been sort of governing. He talks like a populist, and he's been governing like sort of an establishment Republican. Here's a case where he has been literally saying the same things about trade and America getting a bad deal for like 30 years. Guns, immigration, taxes. There is nothing that he believes more fundamentally in his core that he has been more consistent on than this trade issue. And now all of a sudden he's being told by members of his own party and members of his own administration, no, this is not a great idea. You can't do this. The president clearly doesn't want to hear that.
Susan, we have a couple of these little elections that are coming up. We've got Texas, we've got Illinois, we've got Pennsylvania, all possibly different little barometers of how the president is doing, how much his message is resonating or is being used to support Democrats. Democrats think they are riding an enormous blue wave. What does your reporting tell you?
You know, there are red flags for Republicans everywhere, and I don't mean red flags because it looks so good for the Republican Party. I mean signs of trouble. You look at this Pennsylvania special House election, which is next week. It's a district that President Trump carried by 19 percentage points. It is really tied up now. It's entirely possible that the Democrat will win. You look at Texas, which has its primary tomorrow. They have concluded early voting. If you look at the early voting by Republicans is up 11%. Early voting by Democrats is up 24%. And that is a sign of energy and enthusiasm among Democrats, even in a state like Texas, which has not elected a Democrat statewide in almost a quarter century.
Lastly, quickly to you, do you think there's a blue wave coming?
Well, just another sign of that enthusiasm. Democrats in Texas have fielded candidates in every single congressional district. This is the first time that's happened in 25 years. So Democrats, and this is happening not just in Texas, but all over the country, that in districts where Democrats typically haven't even tried to play, they're now playing. So if there is a wave and it's more like a tsunami, all of a sudden we're going to be learning about Democrats we didn't even know existed.
Tamara Keith, Susan Page, thank you both very much.
Thank you.